Hello, and welcome to the Pragmatic Product Chat series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I'm Rebecca Kalogeris for Pragmatic Institute and your host for this episode. If you've ever used Slack, Uber, Amazon, YouTube, small products you may have heard of, then you've interacted with a product shaped by Metalab. And today we have the lead of Metalab, Luke, and he leads this iconic agency that really works with a variety of organizations to build something from 0 to 1, right? So like from an idea to an actuality, they work through all different pieces. Elon Musk had reached out about the Neuralink app, Midjourney, which is like, if you haven't used it, the most amazing image generation tool on earth. They work on that. So he knows a lot about bringing product ideas to life. And so I think he's a great guest for today's show. So welcome, Luke.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Well, I always like to start with origin stories. Like, how did you get where you are, Luke? And why are you so passionate about what it is that you do?
Mm, Good question. I'll feel like I need to go all the way back to kind of talk about my origin story because I think I kind of stumbled into product in a way.
Mm.
I grew up in an extremely creative family. Like I had a father that was a musician and artist, and my mother was much in the same camp. And I tried my hand at much of that and was less successful than they were. Maybe if I would have kept at it, but I just didn't feel like that was my passion, even though I had kind of a creative inkling. And so I got big into other creative spaces, theater, improv, things like that. And when I went to school, I knew that I didn't want to be a struggling artist, so I tried to go the other direction by going into business. And I thought, what's the most creative form of business? Well, marketing. And so I entered that, and part of what I did in marketing was a diploma in entrepreneurship. And I was really excited about the idea of kind of business building and the creativity that took. But as I went through the program, it was very clear that I was spending all of my time with Courtney and Sam, my classmates who had great ideas, and I was there kind of like honing and shaping them with them. But for me, I wasn't coming up with the ideas or kind of developing them myself. It was really about how can I help turn what they had, who maybe they didn't have the skills to kind of take it and turn it into something real and help them form that. And a mentor of mine said, you know what, like that that skill set might really translate into agency. Have you ever thought
Mm.
about that? And I hadn't really heard about agencies that much at the time, but I kind of looked into the idea and started to follow a lot of agencies and got really excited by the idea, just the variety and the ability to impact so much in so many different areas. So I reached out to a number of different agencies out of the blue, just asking if they had jobs, and one got back to me, only one. And they had only one job, and that was to offer me a cold calling job. So it was a design and brand agency, and I, without hesitation, just said yes. And they were like, "Don't you want to know what the pay is?" And I was like, no, I don't care. Let's do this. And so they brought me in, and it turns out they didn't pay. It was purely commission based on if you booked meetings. But I got the experience of starting to kind of see what it was like to kind of experience all kinds of different businesses. I would cold call these businesses. I would get to know what their challenges were, their problems. And pretty quickly, we were driving around in a little red Yaris with a physical portfolio binder and sitting down in these meetings and hearing about, these challenges that companies were having over and over again. And it inspired me throughout that. And so we would share case studies in the physical binder, and then do this great design work, brand, even some web work and all that. And then, from there, I pivoted to a number of different agencies until it really culminated in finding Metalab, where this iconic agency had built out something that really kind of combined all the passions of business building and entrepreneurship with creativity and technology and all that. And I still don't think I've seen an agency that captured me quite like MetaLab was able to do, and that's why I've been here for so long. So,
And I think one of the interesting things about MetaLab, right, is it kind of goes the whole gamut, right? So you guys
mhm,
do like research, you do brand work, you do
mhm,
UI work, but you go all the way then to like,
yep,
market product fix, and you also
yep,
do like execution, like we'll develop it, right? So like there's a
yep,
whole array of process from start to finish, which I
yeah,
think is it's got to be also feeds that sort of interest in areas that you're in.
Totally. And so much of that came from a place of need more than kind of this, deep structured strategy around like, this is where we're going to go. We're going to do all these service offerings. It was, we were a design agency and that's what we were purely focused on. But we were partnering with Silicon Valley's best and brightest to build these businesses. And what we found was, clients would come to us with a problem area and they'd be like, don't worry, we got the research. We know our customers super well. And so we'd be like, okay, we're going to do design. And we'd be like, oh, well, what did you find out in your research? And I'd be like, well, I talked to, my brother over here and he told me this and, and we've got like some scattered, notes from a survey we once did and something like that. And so we're like, well, that's not really going to help us. And we need to hear from users, especially in a complex category or something like that. So we built out a research function by need more than kind of a strategy that we were deploying. And the same was across different functions. And it's all been in service of kind of the best product into market, but engineering was the same. We would design great designs, and then we would wait months after months to wait and see like
Mm.
when this thing going to hit market. And then finally would hit market, and it would be a Frankenstein version of what we had actually designed, this beautiful thing that we were so excited
Oh, the
about. And so
tears.
we built out an engineering team just to say we're not going to let that happen anymore. So we still do kind of some service offerings, just depending on the need on their own, but we have the ability today to kind of take products end to end from we say from napkin sketch to product and market. So
Nice.
yeah.
We talk about in your intro a lot of like the sort of FANG companies and the
Hmm.
big names and because they're sexy, right? Who doesn't
Hmm.
want to be like, well, once I was working on Neuralink or Midjourney,
Yeah.
but you also I haven't talked to you. 40% of your clients are enterprises who
Hmm.
work with you on sort of their Horizon 2 and Horizon 3
Yeah.
bets.
Yeah.
So what do you think is driving this trend, right? For them to kind of outsource these moonshots, the stuff that's sort of outside the
Hmm.
golden goose or the legacy applications that they usually work on.
Yeah. I think it's a number of things, and there's different ways that we're brought into large scale,
Mm,
sometimes 40, 50,000 person organizations where people is not the bottleneck. Oftentimes they have lots of people that can do work, but I think it's a few different things. Sometimes it's a nature of they have been so focused on kind of the core business that it becomes really hard to kind of pivot thinking. And so sometimes it's as simple as, outside lens is needed to kind of come up with new ideas. But I think part of it is really about I think it's so easy to kind of like chase the thing that's in front of you and what you're working on. And I think a lot of times enterprise organizations come to us, the leadership teams recognize maybe, and there's a metaphor that we sometimes use, and maybe I'll take you back to kind of Econ 101, but it's kind of the concept of like a local maximum. If you think about kind of a peak that you're trying to scale, and typically businesses start out at the base of a mountain and they're trying to get to the top, like the fully optimized version of the product, and that can take years and years and years, and there's an incredible skill set behind that. But I think there's a certain point where you're optimizing to the opportunity space that you're playing within. And
mm-hmm.
sometimes there's this moment of realization where you go, are we actually climbing the right mountain? Maybe you're climbing your local mountain and there's actually like Mount Everest somewhere that is this huge opportunity space, but it requires this big pivot. And that's incredibly scary for an internal organization. And I think it can be really challenging for people to pivot their mindset, especially while they're continuing to try to optimize this. So that's a lot of the time where we get brought in is to kind of evaluate whether or not there is a bigger opportunity space to
Mm,
climb. And our job is not to get people straight away to the peak of the mountain, even though we're obviously going to try. But MVP mentality is really about kind of how do we set the foundations and get them as high up, maybe past base camp of that mountain, so that then that team can then go and optimize around a bigger opportunity space. So we've kind of opened up a new green field. So um, that's one of the many examples, but yeah, part of it's just also around skill set, and I think what I've learned more and more so over the years is just the contrasting skill sets, both incredibly important between in-house and what it takes to take a very kind of oftentimes a mix of creativity and analytical decision-making paradigms to be able to kind of like structure those optimizations. Sometimes they're big optimizations, net new feature areas, changing up the onboarding flow, these things that are going to continue to improve. But it's a very different way of thinking and experience needed than, taking what is a kernel of an idea and
Hmm.
going completely blank slate and trying to think about how do we create the best possible version of that, which is, frankly, we try to pull as much data as we can through research, but it's a lot intuition and experience driven. So that's where we
It's
plan.
interesting too, because I think it's not just like the skills and experience of the individuals,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
That's part of it, absolutely. But it's sort of the experience and built in culture and process of the organization,
Hmm.
right? It's one thing to stand in front of the board with a slide that says, we're going to be innovative. This is the area you want to go.
Yeah,
And it's another to have any muscle memory about rapid discovery and rapid experimentation, right? You may
totally.
know with it, but it's not just the individuals, it's the whole organization. And sometimes
Yeah,
PMs are dying for their organizations to do this. Like maybe they've done it somewhere else and are like, look at big
totally.
guy, we could go really fast, but there's so much inertia in the organization that keeps
Yeah.
them from being able to do that. And it's just, we all joke about consultants. It's not true for you guys, where they come in and they can just say things differently because they are on the outside. But here, like you say things differently, but because you have an ecosystem set up for rapid discovery
Yeah.
and experimentation, it's like an incubator that someone
Yeah.
can use, because it is not just a person's skills and their will.
Yeah.
It is this whole organization that can kind of really make it hard to be innovative.
It's 100%. And I think all it takes is like one group or one team to have resistance, protectiveness around
Mm-hmm.
what they have built or are doing, to all of a sudden like create roadblocks. And so that agencies can be this kind of like driving force that cuts through an organization if you have leadership buy-in. And I think our teams do an incredible job of developing buy-in with the teams that we work with too, so that they know like we're not here to steal their work or anything. We want them a part of the process. We need them as kind of subject matter experts, and we want to know what have they learned, what have they taken that's worked, what have they taken that's not worked, and what have they already tried. But then from there, it's a lot about those systems, like you said. So systems that can take something from point A to point B and complete the job and not get blocked by some of those continuous roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes paying for a service forces a leadership team to go, okay, we're not going to let this drag on. It's not going to be
Yeah.
side of desk. Like, we're paying for this. Come on. Like, let's make sure that this thing gets done. And so we reach a conclusion, which is always important.
And I think it's interesting because sometimes when we talk about sometimes companies will build internal teams
Hmm.
that focus specifically on Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. And there is
Hmm.
a little bit of like, they're the cool kids, I'm not. And then even
Hmm.
if there isn't a separate team going the same
Yeah.
way, like, oh, sure, we're just outsourcing our innovation now. Like there's a little bit of that. And like,
Yeah.
really, if you can switch your thinking to, where you want to shift, but you know that
Yeah.
your organization right now is not built to test that out. This is really like, hey, go prove my idea is right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
in the best of ways.
Yeah.
Um, don't feel territorial. Feel like a partner
Yeah.
that's here to help your vision
Yeah.
take off.
Well, that's a lot of what we focused our hiring on is kind of those two ends of the spectrum, which is like we need people that are collaborators by nature. We often say like no Machiavellian crap. Like it's got to be really focused in on kind of these people that are collaborators by nature, because none of our
Mm-hmm.
projects work as kind of like solo lone wolf. It's very much like a team collaboration, and how do we bounce product ideas off of each other and iterate towards success. But I think the other side of it is about just like reps. It's repetition. And if you think about kind of again the incredible skill set that it takes to take a product, an established product, and then hone and iterate on it, it's great. But a lot of the people that are lifelong in those types of organizations have never been a part of that inception
No.
stage of a net new
Yeah.
build. And it is a very different skill set. And that's not to say that folks can't learn that, but um, it is really that repetition where if we hire a designer, we hire them for their kind of like core skill sets or experience, but they'll get injected into Metalab, and within a year they'll have shipped three, four products from the
That's
ground up.
awesome.
And if you think about what happens over 2 or 3 years, that learning is, they're not just like, it's not vaporware. They're building products that they then see go to market and go, did that work? Did it not work? And they kind of understand that. So I remember a conversation with a fellow named Ravi Mehta, who was the chief product officer of Tinder, and he was kind of describing like, uh, what is it that Metalab brings? And it's this. He was like, I think even if I brought all the best people from my organization together onto a team, it wouldn't be the same because you guys have these. He referred to it as the at bats. Your batting average is going
Mm,
to get better if you continue to take
yeah.
swings, and that's what we've been doing for 20 years. So.
Right. And there really isn't another company out there that has that many releases that you're involved in. I was saying they don't have any releases. I'm like, okay, Google releases things all the time, but
Mhm.
in various different teams,
Yeah,
right? So it's the
yeah,
same way of you guys being able to see and
yep,
participate in so many and across so many different things. To your
totally.
point, the learnings, the
Yep,
processes that you learn, that you both learn the process and know how to wiggle in different
yeah.
circumstances is a it's hard to beat.
Well, and I think it's knowing how not to get boxed in. Like a lot of agencies, they end up finding a niche that they're good at, and then they kind of like go hard at that. They become the healthcare agency, or they become
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
X agency. And I think that's what a lot of clients come to us looking for too. Is like, we are a finance company, and so what's your experience in finance? And sure, we've got tons of experience in fintech products and all that. But I think what's more important than that is our teams have experience across all these segments. And so how do we take the best of, Robinhood and Uber and a healthcare product that we've seen this great onboarding flow in, and like we've built and tried and tested all these things. And so how do we bring that all together so that you don't create the best in your category, but we create
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a category definer, something that is kind of feels different to the users that actually go and use that product. So
It's extra important when we think about sort of the blurring of the line between our expectations on B2C and B2B
mhm.
experiences. And that means that I expect my fintech software to work an
Yep,
awful lot like my
yep,
name another software, right?
yep.
It's only helpful.
Well, and that's something we
Um,
believed in for decades. Like if you look at Slack as, a perfect example of that, it was kind of reshaping a mindset where instead of expecting, Yammer and Skype or Atlassian, some of these ones great brand, but how do we create something that feels completely different, consumer software in the context of enterprise?
yeah. Okay, so one thing I didn't mention in the intro, but I think is super interesting about MedLab is that you guys
Hmm.
are both an agency and a venture fund now, right?
Hmm.
So you weren't always, but you are now. And so
Hmm.
I was curious after we talked about that, like, how does having skin in the game change how you
Hmm.
approach product development?
Good question. I think it does change our approach. So I think there's a couple things that happens. I think oftentimes if and not every investment we make is in a client, but a lot of them are. And I think that's the benefit of just having access to these top tier
Mm-hmm.
founders that are coming in the door. And so we kind of have this partnership baked in. But I think one, we get a deeper access. There are times where founders come in and they're still somewhat cagey about like, you don't need to know about this, just like focus on this. And sometimes that can be a disservice to the work that we're doing. And so when we invest, we really do take a much deeper look
Mm-hmm.
into the businesses that we're working with, and oftentimes that provides insights that does help us in the work. But I think the other side of it is just the employee bought in nature. So we have created this model whereby when we invest in a company, the upside of that ends up being shared amongst the employee base. And so they've all got, instead of kind of an investment in a single startup that they might go work with, where it's binary, it either works or it doesn't, and
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm spending my years. At MetaLab, they're developing a bit of a portfolio of all these companies that they end up working with that they see some upside on. And so I think that develops a bit more of kind of like a stuck-in nature where that mentality shifts where this is my business, and
What a
I,
great
I want to.
recruitment piece too,
Yeah, it's good.
right?
It's good. It's good. The venture fund's been a great addition to the business, which started about 3 years ago. So it's,
So I think the other question that's logical in that area
yeah.
is like when you're evaluating
Hmm.
a new project, like what makes you think whether it's an investment or just really good client work, right?
Hmm.
Like what are the signals that you're like, ooh, this is interesting?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I guess that goes back to part of the reason why we actually formed the venture fund was because we realized like yeah, we're in such a, and I don't want to make this sound like bragging, but we're in such a fortunate spot where for years now, this is before my time, and I've been at the company for 10 years, but before my time, we were always in a spot where we had thousands of companies every year coming to us. And
Mm.
sales for us was, partially about kind of like explaining our services, but a huge part of it was how do we build the best portfolio of the future so that the products that we build are successful and then more clients come to us just because of word of
Hmm.
mouth. And then we get access to the best and the best and the best over and over again. So to make that cycle work, we had to get really good at turning clients away and evaluating kind of like where do we put, and we kind of always joked about this being like we're VCs, but instead of capital, we're using human capital. It sounds maybe a bit derogatory in a way, but it's we've got a finite pool of people that can work on these things, and so where do we actually place the highest value in putting them in? Um, and so after joking about being a VC for a while, eventually we just said maybe we should be one.
Hmm.
We're already
Hmm.
doing this work, and I think there's something very unique about an agency in which, we haven't been too public about the venture fund. And so most clients come to us and they don't know about the venture fund. They're looking for services. And if you're a traditional venture fund, typically a founder is coming with their polished deck and they're telling you about the TAM and the, incredible market opportunity and why
Right.
there's like
Everybody wants one.
there's no doubt about it. They're gonna win. We've got this awesome team. And sometimes when a founder is coming to an agency, they're really quick. It's almost like a therapy session. They're really quick to say, oh gosh, like I'm struggling with this. Like we're not sure about that. This team member isn't pulling their weight, and we've got to kind of like think about that in the context of this, or like we need help. And it's a very different kind of almost like a backdoor entry to we get the real on the business. And that's allowed us to really, decide, are we going to introduce the idea of the venture fund to them? Yes, no, maybe. And then
Hmm.
from there, it really does have to be there are incredible products that we are excited to work on. We're going to be honing our skill set working in an area, but maybe it's just a space that, like, from an investment standpoint, we just don't know enough about the category yet, and so we want to kind of
Yeah.
play it out a bit. And so we're honest with clients across the board, and they normally appreciate the honesty and the candor. And sometimes it's just to say, hey, we want to do some work together first, and like that'll be the best test for us of like doing our diligence, and then from there we can see whether an investment makes sense. But it's always a challenge. Yeah.
What a fun new arm, though.
It's
So,
been good.
uh, we've name dropped quite a few names, right? You think about
Yeah.
but you've helped shape products that are shaping the way we live and work, right?
Hmm.
Like that's
Hmm.
not an overstatement. That's not an overstatement, right? Slack and Uber and Midjourney. And when you think about that, are there patterns that you see? There must be, because it also helps you pick the client work. But the
Hmm.
patterns you see that make you go, okay, this one is going to have
Hmm.
impact. This one is doing something different and special.
Hmm. Definitely. And I think there are a lot of different reasons why something ends up being successful. I think that sometimes it's a space that like when a founder explains it to you, you just go, oh my goodness, like why has no one thought about this before? I
Mm-hmm.
remember Pat Kinsel coming in the door and he was super successful multi-time founder, and he had this personal experience where he was trying to complete the sale of one of his businesses, and he had wrapped up all of his notarization with a lawyer, and then he was heading off for a ski trip. And while he's on the mountain, he's getting a call from his lawyer saying like, I'm so sorry, we forgot a page, and we're not going to be able to complete this for until you're back. And he was on this like 3-week ski trip, and while he's there, he breaks his leg, ends up in the hospital, and he's sitting there after surgery and he's going, this is ridiculous. We are in an era where there are robots going to the moon. There are, self-driving cars. Like, how can I not notarize something without going physically into this notary and working this process out? And so when he came to us, it was just like that was the point. He had gone,
Yeah.
aha, like there has to be a better way. And he had found some,
Yeah.
regulatory loopholes, and came to us and just said, like, let's go. We're ready to build this product. And instantly we were just, duh, like virtual notarization, of course that's going to be a huge market. So there's examples like that, but I think sometimes there's also really busy spaces that there's no real reason for an up and comer to win other than sometimes you just feel it in a founder who,
Mm.
whether that's I think about kind of like a Chris Marsalek from crypto.com, who he was just ready to bet it all. And he had, you know, been burned once or twice in past ventures, and he just saw this opportunity in crypto, and he instantly just knew this is gonna be my space and I'm gonna own this. And made a deal to buy the URL crypto.com with crazy expensive terms, but it was on a lease. So it was, I'm gonna pay a lot now, but at the end of this 10 years, I'm going to pay an insane amount of money, and I'll be happy to do it because I know that this business by then is going to be that. So we bought crypto.com. And of course, it became something huge. And,
Yeah.
I think we've seen that a number of times over. Stuart, who just looked at like the chat space and went, this is a busy space, but there's a different way of doing this. And there needs to be kind of like Metalab has never been interested in, building the thousandth iteration of a product that's just supposed to
Hmm.
be kind of
Hmm.
like another one in the market that maybe can capture a bit of market share. And so we turn down most products that come to us like that. Our focus is how can we work at the inflection point of founders or leaders within enterprise who really, really give a damn and are just hell bent on making a huge change.
Mm.
And it's clear. You talk to them and you can feel the passion or you can't. And some
Yeah.
people are working on an assignment and some people are working their life's work. And
Hmm.
there's a difference.
Wow, that's really because you talked about like an untapped problem space, right? We're all
Yeah.
annoyed by the notary thing. It does seem insane, right? So you're like, yeah, okay, there's a problem that's solved. It is different when you're talking about a space that's crowded and either you
Hmm.
need a really differentiated approach. I mean, that's
Hmm.
mostly what you're looking for.
Hmm.
But I do think it's interesting that how we talk we deal a lot with enterprise companies and companies in scale mode
Yeah.
where founder led can have a bad connotation because we're at
Hmm.
that scale where it
Totally.
has to go beyond command and control, but you
Yeah.
cannot understate the importance of a strong founder to get you to the point where you start
Totally.
to go against them.
Yeah.
And it is their belief and their passion
Yeah.
and sort of the tangible intangibles
Yeah.
that make you go, yep, that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a unicorn founder that can kind of like carry things from start all the way through. I think of like Eric at Zoom. Like he's done
Yep.
that
Yep.
and very successfully. And say what you will about kind of like I would love to get in there and help with some of their design at times, but it's a really good product and
Mhm.
they've done incredibly well. But I think similar to what we were talking
Well,
about
and they
about
scaled in a high stress, high demand
exactly,
moment too. Like,
totally.
let's be honest, it
Yep,
wasn't like no one was watching.
yep,
We were all watching. There
we
was
were.
nothing else to do.
Yep,
Like, it
yep.
was, yeah.
It's telenovela there.
Although
We're just
their
watching.
their new chat UI,
Yeah, yeah.
we won't talk about.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. We have some experience in the chat space. Call me Eric.
Yes.
Um, yeah, but I think that's similar to what we're talking about in terms of the agency and the difference between the experience of building 0 to 1 versus building in-house. It's oftentimes there's a point where there's a transition that needs to be made, and people make
Hmm.
the opposite mistake, which is I talk to a lot of founders who are in that 0 to 1 phase, and they get kind of starry-eyed looking at I'm gonna go poach this person who's like a great like maybe next step leader at the business that I'm aspiring to become.
Hmm.
And then they
Hmm.
bring them in and they realize that that person is not built for this 0 to 1 phase. And like that's a completely different skill set. And so
Yeah,
I think there are some unicorns that can kind of translate between the two, but it's in every
is
role. But
less
it's
typical.
it's less typical for sure.
Do you have so under that it's we're talking about like so to run a large enterprise organization, to run the $10 billion organization is an entirely different skill set. And it's
Hmm.
you've got boards and you're public like there's a ton.
Yeah,
When they come to you to help with their 0 to 1 or Horizon 2, Horizon 3, or
yeah,
Horizon 3 really offerings,
yeah.
do do you think they fully understand how like do they come to you because they're like yeah it would probably be easier there do you think they understand enough how much they're in their own way if they tried to do it themselves?
It's typically not without an injection of kind of new blood into an organization like that a MetaLab gets
Okay, that
brought in.
makes sense.
So a lot of the times the clients that bring us into, a Nike, a Yahoo of these large organizations, it's oftentimes the same people that we worked with at a startup. And now they've gone on to take on a leadership role within a large scale organization because that organization hired them because they're like a disruptor and they want to capture
Yep.
that. And their recommendation is, I can already see it. This is not going to work if we try to do this internally. Like, you can give me the money, I'll hire some people, and I can tell you it just won't happen. And
Mm.
so they kind of like inject that fresh thinking to say, we need to go bring someone else in, or we need to do things a different way. And that's oftentimes how it happens, more often than you think.
Yeah, that makes sense. You both have a champion, but they've
Yeah,
also already admitted they need disruption,
yeah,
right? They've already understood that. What they don't know is how to do it,
yeah, exactly.
right? So they're like, I'll hire that person because they've done it before, but they
Yeah,
don't really understand
yeah,
organizationally, systemically, what it needs to do.
yeah,
And then that person, that makes a ton of
yeah.
sense.
And so, like, one of two things that happen: either that person forces change, or that organization goes, "We're not actually. We liked the idea of it, but that was in theory. Now
Yep.
that we're like down to like practice level, this isn't going to work." And that person exits the business, gets frustrated, gets kind of
Yep.
disenfranchised, and then things change. So it's
We've seen that. We've all seen that.
we
Yes.
see that happen.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's good.
Wow. All right. So we've talked about a ton of different things today,
Hmm.
Luke. If you were going to have listeners, if you're going to have our product managers that are listening and product marketers listening, do two things differently tomorrow based on what we talked about today, what would that be?
I think, like I said, there's a profile that's a unicorn, but that doesn't mean that, just because you aren't that unicorn today, you can't be. And so I would encourage everyone to kind of like take a challenger mindset into their own products and think about, like, are you working towards a local maximal, or are you actually thinking about, like, is there a bigger opportunity that we're not even challenging? And I think all it takes is kind of like one voice of passion and excitement to change an entire organization's thinking. And some organizations are built to support that and some aren't. But I think either way, even if you take that kind of uh, repetitive kind of thinking pattern into your next organization, it's going to be valuable. That'd be one. Um,
I like that one too, because whether or not I'm going to be the 0 to 1
mhm,
product manager person, understanding it, exploring it will help me see opportunities
mhm.
that I think are really important
Yeah,
to see outside of the sort of incremental betterment, which is
yeah,
also important.
yeah,
But I think just building that muscle, no matter what you want to do, is a
yeah.
really strong uh, idea.
Yeah. And then maybe number two would just be, obviously, talk to your users constantly. I'm sure
Oh
you
gosh,
are
yes.
already, but I would say, don't get stuck in your own category. And I think that's something that we do often to be able to kind of expand our mindset. But I think especially if you're working in a specific category or space, you spend all your time oftentimes just looking at the other players in your space. And if you're looking for inspiration, go beyond that. Stretch out.
Hmm.
Find a random category that you know nothing about and start looking at the products in that space. Get inspired by a feature, a way of kind of engaging loyalty or driving, a new way of presenting dashboards or something like that that can drive into kind of new ways of thinking about design and technology. So I think product managers, be inspired by everything around you, not just what's directly in front of you.
Great feedback. All right,
Mhm.
Luke, this was delightful. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah,
on.
thanks for having me. I enjoyed this. All
Excellent.
right.
All right, that does it for today's episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.